Dumelang, Absheni, Lochani, Sanbonani, Molweni. Good afternoon. We welcome you once again to a webinar on protecting South African selections in the digital age. We are excited that you are all here. Le amogelehile once again. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to drop the questions on the chat. So we are more than happy to respond to any questions that may arise. This webinar is hosted by Tales of Turning in partnership with Social Change Assistance Trust, SCAT, and the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, IGR. Together with ACCORD, we will be having facilitators from all the different organizations present facilitating the webinar with us. We are once again excited to have you here with us, and we look forward to your insights. I'm now just going to quickly hand over to a colleague from Tales of Turning. Steph, over to you.
Thank you, Siobata, and hello everyone. My name is Steph Snell, and it's my honor and privilege to introduce the early adopters of this innovative and essential intervention. So I'd like to welcome Bukanyo Nkwatale. He's from ACCORD, Johan Harding from SCAT, Jeffrey Mamputa from Tales of Turning, my organization, and Felicity Harrelson from IJR. So why are we here? I'll give you the short version. So we aim to train and mentor about 2,500 voluntary digital peacemakers in the run-up to and over the elections and post-election. We want, and to do this, we want to extend partnership to other civil society organizations. We're going to monitor public social media and research online election-related narratives, and operate an early warning and early response system. Social media is arguably the area that presents the biggest threat to free and fair elections in today's world. And the cost of a failed election is unimaginable versus the cost of an initiative like this. So as a result, we're very bullish about raising money from capital, sort of stokvel style, and we will be appealing to our philanthropists to shake their spreadsheets and weigh in on this. Siobata, could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so this is about civil society taking, I don't want to charge is maybe too strong a word, but taking a really strong hand about what happens in social media and what we can do about that. And so we're going to do that by addressing mis and disinformation, amplifying civic education, and building during the election process for the local government elections that are coming. Siobata, could I get the next slide? Okay, so there's just a few things I want to impart about social media in South Africa. So 60% of the adult population are present on social media. Of that 60%, the biggest slice is in the younger age groups under 35. That's really significant, and it's a big slice of people. And then there's this thing, the 1 to 9 to 90 ratio on social media. And I just want to explain that. It'll take a second. So 1% of social media make noise on social, 1% of the people on social media. 9% of people on social media interact with that noise. And 90% of social media watch. The the thing that's really important to take into consideration is the power that that 1% yields in terms of influencing things. And that's where we can impact. So on average, South Africans spend 3.2 hours a day compared to a global average of 2.4 hours. And social media is loaded with much more youth and women than men. So it fits straight into that target area. Siabata, can you take me to the next slide? Okay, so this is a results of an experiment we did in the 2021 elections around mis and disinformation. And it was some research based on what we were doing undertaken by the University of Washington. And this is lab-based research. So what you're looking at is this is the beginning of something that is known now as social truth queries. What a social truth query is, it's asking you a question. It's saying, how do you know that? Where do you get that from? Can you share more information? And what that does is it severely changes the way people respond, whether they like or share a post. It reduces it considerably. So this was the smoking gun for us, and since then we've been doing further research. And then in the 2024 general elections in South Africa, we did research in the wild. Siabata, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so what are these social truth questions? It's non-confrontational questions designed to reduce engagement and harmful content. And in the trials in the wild we did last year, we managed to achieve a reduction between 77 and 82%. So the 82% reduction is around sharing, and the 72% is around likes. This is phenomenal, actually. It completely outstrips fact-checking and any other interventions that are kind of human-based that I know of. So what does it do? It encourages critical thinking. It gets you to reflect, that's all. It avoids re-traumatizing survivors, and it uses evidence-based questioning. During the election, we were doing it in 5 different languages. Thanks, Siabata. So there are 3 areas that dialogue facilitation takes place. The first one is campaigns. I think it's meant to be campaigns, yes. Messaging and amplification. So dialogue facilitators, people who are allies online, they get drawn into campaigns, amplifying messaging, etc. The other one is the social truth queries, where a question is placed behind a post in as soon as possible after it's presented. And then the third one is what we call deepening the conversation, where people engage. Dialogue facilitators strive to deepen the conversation. It doesn't matter what the conversation is. The point is to deepen whoever's in the conversation, their understanding of what they're talking about. Thanks, Siabata. So AI and community-based organizations. So all of this happens on AI. When we started, it was machine learning, and then came the LLMs, and now it's all AI. So AI does this searching the internet for narratives. Those narratives are sorted, gathered, and give insights into what's happening in localized areas around themes, etc. And at the same time, also used for amplifying goals. So for the partners who are involved here, this is really going to be a really good introduction into AI and how it works, and then possibly how they could use it elsewhere within their organizations. Currently on AI, we've built an agent. I think Barent's in the room here somewhere. He built it. that has been built on the basis of the social truth queries. We're having very, very positive results from that, and we're in a process of testing. We're in a process of testing that. We will be having a webinar about the testing in about 2 weeks' time, and everybody who was invited, who's pitched up here, will also be invited to that webinar. Siabata, thank you. So finally, it's around networks, around building networks of people, and what we're doing as a collection of civil society organizations is doing that. All those networks have influence within social media, and we draw those networks together. We provide resources and encouragement, etc., for a network, for voluntary dialogue facilitators to act online. And then, of course, with the analytics, their impact, etc., is measured. So that's very, very brief introduction to something that is worthy of much, much more conversation. But this is just the opening. So with that, I want to hand over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Steph, and to the fellow presenters and the audience who have joined us online on this important and timely conversation. Allow me to begin with the state of local government. The challenges, systematic issues that local government it's currently seized with, issues around unreliable water supply, electricity disruptions, which around issues of load shedding, load reduction, structural issues in sanitation and dilapidated infrastructure because of lack of maintenance, and also around issues of voter apathy amongst the youth, which is increasing because of the challenges that we currently have. Can I have this next slide? Sabata? So all these issues are, of course, communities, they grow very impatient and are frustrated at the level and the pace at which the municipalities or local government is responding to such. So what we see happening on the ground, it's the community will respond in a form of service, community service protest, where they will demonstrate. And this protest, sometimes they take form in different forms or shape. For an example, what happened, there are two scenarios that happened in Johannesburg. We know that Johannesburg is currently facing a problem of water. So we had seen the white community that were protesting in one area, but it was a peaceful protest where they had placards. They were not disrupting the flow of traffic, and they did not barricade the roads and that. And on the other hand, you had the black community, which barricaded the roads and disrupted the flow of traffic. So communities are getting more frustrated on that level. That's why we will have frequent service delivery protest. And my take on that is that even moving closer to 2026, we'll still see more of this. But again, we should not insulate communities from taking responsibility, because we have got communities which are not taking their part in terms of assisting municipality and local government by not paying their rate and taxes. And you see that all of these are root causes. I've already touched on issues of structural issues, your high unemployment, especially amongst the youth, deep poverty, high inequality that is happening in South Africa, and also the political instabilities that we see in municipalities, which result in weakened service delivery. Then communities don't get the services that they are required to get in terms of the constitution. But I'm also saying that we should not insulate communities, because they are not paying their rate and taxes. And now local government, municipalities are faced with the challenge that they cannot collect revenue. They have to rely more on national grants. Next slide. Youth instability, it's a very worrying factor because of the high unemployment, the extreme high unemployment that the youth are facing. And many of the youth, they feel that they are excluded from economic participation or the opportunities that comes, which leads also to what we call political cynicism, because the youth feel that their voting does not bring meaningful change into their material condition. The status quo remains, because South Africa still remains one of the high youth unemployment. So we see the emerging instability amongst the youth. It's something that we need to really keep a leash on it and keep an eye on it, which leads also to issues of the youth disengaging with electoral processes and participating in destructive protest activities. There was an Afro barometer polling that was done in 2024, which shows that the support for democracy has dropped from 72% to 43%, which is a very worrying factor, while satisfactory with democratic performance has plummeted from 60% to 25%, which shows that perhaps democracy is in danger if we see these patterns going forward. On the issue of voter apathy and democratic risk, young people feel disengaged, like I've said, in the electoral processes, which leads to democratic deficit. It weakens democracy. And this has to, again, on the low voter turnout at local municipalities, signal a decline in trust in municipalities, because municipalities cannot deliver on services, and community will rely on protest to voice their frustration than going on dialogue. Because there's this notion that in South Africa, to get the attention of the municipality or government, you have to go to the street, because when it has to come to issues of dialogue, it seems that government does not respond adequately or sufficiently. Can I have this next slide? Sabata? So, what are the risks for violence? The risk factors for violence are present, like I've already alluded to the fact that we see many of the community protests that are taking place, service delivery protests. Another issue is the economic desperation. We know that our economy it fluctuates. It's not performing well, that people are able to get jobs to generate employment. And also, what is critical around this service delivery issues is how our police respond to protest, because it's either they can escalate violence or escalate it. So their response is very critical. We could remember what happened to Andreas Tatani, who was a community activist who was shot at a close range by the police and died. So social media also plays a very important and fundamental role, because it can mobilize communities. It's used as a tool to mobilize and spread misinformation. And also you would have some criminal elements that creeps into genuine community consent or service delivery protests. Then you have people who come up with their illegal activities. So what are the areas, or what you call hotspot areas, which we should pay attention to moving forward to the 2026 local government? It's communities that are under-serviced, it's informal settlement. You know that South Africa it's experiencing a very rapid exponential rise of informal settlement, and which sometimes they are not even financially, municipality did not financially plan for such, on issues of sanitation, housing, and so that also can cause, because communities would use the election period also to demonstrate towards their community needs. So in terms of the community strength, despite this risk, communities shows potential for peace building. The fact that community mobilizations it indicates that communities still cares about issues of good governance. Otherwise, they could have said, no, it's not our problem. Let's just take a setback and see when government will resolve these issues. But they are trying to push government to say we need to deliver services, which is a constitutional right. So civic networks, churches, NGOs, and dialogue, which is important around the issues of voter and civic education, that we need to educate our people to say perhaps we should use our voting power well and adequately in order to address our issues rather than going to the street to protest. And around issues of inclusion and decision-making processes, those issues I have to do again with IDPs, because some of the community, they feel that they are not part and parcel of the integrated development plan by municipalities. So municipalities, they don't know the needs of the community. They take decisions on behalf of the community. Next slide. In conclusion, I want us to depart on the key question whether institutions can rebuild trust before frustration deepens further. And as I've already alluded to the fact that sometimes a government acts very late, or they act after action has been taken. And moving towards 2026 local government election, that question, it becomes critical whether municipalities as institution can rebuild trust in servicing community, in ensuring that they fulfill their constitutional mandate. Thank you, Sabata. I'm now going to hand over to Jeff. Over to you, Jeff.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mukai. Sabata, I'm briefly going to look at some of the things that the last two speakers have raised, but I'll be much more specific around the issues of the causes of election tensions and violence. We'll look at some of the indicators. What do we see happening that tells us that there'll be conflict here, or there's tensions here, and there's potential for violence? And then what is the role, and how does listening to social media help us to de-escalate and avoid and prevent violence during the electoral period? Just briefly, what's happening is that most of the time, people see elections as only the day of election, usually a Wednesday. But there's a whole year before that, what we call pre-elections, and then the actual elections, and then there's post-elections. And all those periods are pregnant with the potential for violence, either from disputes and misinformation just before elections. And some of these things are pre-existing issues, either between parties or between communities and local government or national government. Just to give a few examples. For instance, you see the political environment. We've already seen it happening in Cape Town, and I think in Natal also. One of the things that you see is the assassination and murder of candidates or office holders. It happened about a month ago here in Crossroads in Cape Town. And this is the third time that a candidate or a sitting ward councillor has been murdered or shot. Usually, that's an indicator that elections are coming. Secondly, we find inter-party and inter-party tensions. As much as contestation is healthy for a democracy, but sometimes, once it's taken too far, it can lead to violence and conflict. And how do we pick up on this? We pick this up on social media, because there's always indicators. And then another issue is the issue of boundary disputes. We know the famous case of Vembe in Mpumalanga and Limpopo, where the communities were against the boundaries that were drawn, And virtually, it was very difficult for elections to take place. The high levels of violence that were reported because of the boundary disputes, people did not want the boundaries to be drawn the way they were. On the other hand, because there's limited understanding of political demarcation within communities, and communities do not participate in the process of demarcating when they get consulted. Another interesting thing is the formation of new parties, especially in South Africa. I think we're moving on. We're well over 300 parties that have registered. Not all of them may compete, because not all of them may meet the requirements. But every year, every election, there's new parties coming in, and that causes tensions within communities and within the political environment. The issue of leadership disputes, especially the very thin and very delicate balance we're trying to hold in South Africa between traditional leadership, the chiefs and the kings, and ward councillors. That has led to violent situations, especially in rural South Africa, in the rural areas. On the socio-economic front, we look at high unemployment. Bukanyo had mentioned it. I think Steph mentioned it, especially amongst youth. And then the trend towards urban migration, which of course leads to the development and the growth of informal settlements within the cities and on the margins of the cities. And of course, that then leads to undesirable living conditions and high densification, population densities in those areas. And that also means that there'll be lack of infrastructure, because most of the informal areas do not have infrastructure, and therefore that leads to crime, and crime can be used opportunistically at election time. And then in South Africa, over the past few months, we've had the relief now. There was the issue of inflation. Out of the socio-economic causes of electoral violence, I'll just spend a minute or so talking about crime. Crime, especially in Cape Town, the Cape Flats of Cape Town, and then in Johannesburg and the northern suburbs of Port Elizabeth. The issue of drugs and the proliferation of drugs in these areas, vandalism of infrastructure through as an expression of dissatisfaction sometimes, and sometimes it's drug fueled because people destroy things to go and sell the material. And this leads to a very difficult situation for those who are responsible for conducting elections, in this case the IEC, because the safety of their staff is not guaranteed in certain areas. The IEC has done much to work with security agencies to prevent that, but we find that sometimes staff would resign from the IEC because of the intolerable and unsafe and insecure environments that they work in certain areas. At times when there is taxi violence, that disrupts and prevents people from accessing and reaching voting stations. Another issue that can lead and can be a cause of electoral violence, potential, is service delivery. I think Mukanya once more had mentioned that. We have a crisis of water. We have crisis of electricity in South Africa, and we may go back there's a threat of, what was the term for when we don't have electricity? We may go back to that situation. And the other thing is access to municipal services, especially for those areas that are in the rural areas and areas that are in the informal areas. in the cities and the towns. The issue of illegal occupation of land impacts on development. And all of those issues that we've mentioned can then lead to tensions and lead to electoral violence and to violence just before the elections or during the elections or shortly after the election. When you look at the indicators, what are some of the indicators that we see a couple of months, sometimes weeks before election? The one that we mentioned is the assassination of candidates. But during the time of campaigning, one would to witness or see the disruption of party meetings or rallies. At party level, within parties, dissatisfaction over candidate lists, intimidation of voters, and you find that people are scared and unable to access voting stations because of gang wars, as we had to witness in Avian Park in Worcester a couple of times. And then the defiling or destruction of party posters. Mis and disinformation is spread through social media. Most of the time, you get rumors about missing ballot papers or ballot papers that have been dumped next to the road or ballot papers that were found before the elections have already taken place. So these are just some of the things that when one monitors elections, we look at those things. There's many of them. And although we do not have time to go through all of them today. And then we say to ourselves, listening to social media then, to de-escalate or to prevent or to minimize violence, how does it help? Steph outlined a study by the Washington University, and he outlined how we do it, how we listen, the kind of questions, the truth questions that we ask. But when one monitors and listens to social media, one can accurately identify whether there is a campaign around the disinformation and where it comes from. Where it comes from in terms of one can lead it associated with certain parties, with certain areas. If it's Cape Town, within Cape Town, which part of Cape Town and which party is dominant in that part. So social media helps one to locate, identify the issues, and sort of gauge the sentiment in the build-up to elections, and therefore develop effective strategies to counter and to respond to such misinformation and disinformation. Thank you very much, Tiabata. I now hand over to Joanne. Thank you, Joanne.
Hi, thank you, everyone. As many of you may know, SCAT is a funder of community-based organizations, and we work to support these organizations to be champions for social justice and for change in their communities. And I'm very pleased to see many of you are on this call. So welcome to see all the SCAT-funded partners here today. But community-based organizations are a really important role player during the election process, especially organizations that are working closely on the ground. We know that they can play a very valuable role in promoting informed participation so that people know what the election means, know who they're voting for, know what the process is, know how they can think democratically and participate actively. The CBOs have an important role to play in amplifying marginalized people's voices and getting them into spaces where they can hold leadership accountable, and ensure that there's ethical leadership. They have a very important role to play in building active citizenship. Thanks, Sebastian. We really want to encourage community-based organizations to participate in actions that are keeping peace in communities, ensuring that people are well informed, that they can protect the interests of communities and people are not living in fear during an election process, and that they can play a role in strengthening accountability, particularly at a local government level. Local government is such an important role player government role player for our citizens, and we really do need to strengthen local government in this country. We need to make sure that we're voting for people that are going to make sure that our socioeconomic rights are protected, that we get the services that they've committed to, that we have access to water, housing, sanitation, we have safety and security in communities and good healthcare. So we need to choose our local governments carefully. We need to be well informed during this election process. And I want to encourage all of the community-based organizations that we are working with to take an active role in this election process. We've got a couple of months, maybe a bit longer, to prepare for the next elections, and we all need to get actively involved. Thanks very much, Sebata.
Thank you, Joanne. We are now going to hand over to Felicity. Over to you, Felicity.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. I really do appreciate it. So good afternoon, everyone. Today I want to talk about the critical moment facing South Africa in the run-up to the 2026-27 local government elections, looking at the risks of violence that can undermine our democracy and the powerful role that dialogue can play in securing a peaceful future for all. So if we look at the current context, we have fragile trust and a lot of disquiet and dissatisfaction with our democracy. So looking at the data that IJR has produced from the 2025 Reconciliation Barometer, the data paints a clear picture of our present reality. In just 1 year into the government of national unity, South Africans are experiencing deep public fragility, even as democratic processes continue. About 1/3 of citizens express confidence in the effectiveness of political institutions, which means that 2/3, that's 66% of the population, don't. And the trust in local government is extremely low, which is around 1 in 4. And that is the lowest of all institutions surveyed. This lack of trust stems from widespread dissatisfaction with leadership, persistent inequality, poverty, and slow progress in economic inclusion. Many people continue to feel unheard and excluded from meaningful participation in shaping their own futures. I think this was highlighted by previous speakers. While the IEC has indicated the absence of outright political hotspots at the moment, historical trends show that local government contests tend to turn violent, driven by competition for resources, factional politics, and weakened community trust. So in terms of the violence that we're seeing, there are risks that remain, especially within the context of the GNU. There are heightened political tensions. We have historical violence patterns which emanate from 1994 and even before that, and socioeconomic stresses. Violence, if left unchecked, threatens not just the lives, but the legitimacy of our democratic process. It deepens mistrust and discourages voter participation and undermines the very delivery of services that many people are looking to acquire, and especially in communities who already feel marginalized. So if we look at why dialogue matters, it strengthens relationships between neighbors, within communities, and between citizens and leaders. We need to engage in open, respectful dialogue, and I think this was something that Steph was alluding to earlier in terms of the amount of cyberbullying and disrespectful discussion that takes place online. Peacebuilding and community dialogue isn't just the responsibility of government. Every South African can play a part. I think just building on what Steph was saying earlier, we need to leverage the digital tools. Youth and many citizens across the country are deeply engaged online, and this offers both a challenge and an opportunity. On the one hand, social media can amplify anger, misinformation, and division. But on the other hand, it does reveal real-time sentiments across communities. By investing in social media research, we can detect rising tensions early, we can track circulating narratives, and we can understand community concerns before they spill into physical violence. In terms of bringing people together, digital dialogues offer us online platforms that can create safe, moderated spaces. We need to have trained facilitators, but using facilitators and online dialogues can promote peaceful narratives. And we can also encourage interactive citizenry and public participation through online discussions. The use of online platforms is not to avoid difficult topics. It's about navigating them respectfully to create conditions within which differences can be aired, and we can escalate without escalating into conflict. So as South Africans, we need to prepare for this pivotal local government election by listening to one another, to support the space for dialogues before elections and not just afterwards, invest in research, and embrace digital technologies as tools for connection. As some of our research reminds us, national identity remains strong. Most people believe that a united South Africa is possible, and that trust can be built through action, and the action of everybody, not just government. Just in conclusion, violence in elections doesn't just happen. It grows through fear, division, mistrust, and a lack of communication and inclusion. Where there is dialogue and transparency, understanding and action is possible. Let us commit as leaders, as youth, as ordinary citizens, to create understanding and not to contribute to conflict. Let us build a democracy where every voice is heard and every vote is respected. Thank you for listening, and I'm going to hand back to Steph.
Thank you, Felicity. That was fabulous. And Jeff, Joanne, Boikanyo, that was really great. Thanks so much. So we have election coming, and there are things we can do to help nurse that another election through. I've been doing it since '94. Jeff has been doing it for a long time. We need to get skin in the game in social media. If the citizenry doesn't take charge in social media, the bots and the vested interests are going to rule the day. So this is an invitation to organizations who are here, who want to participate, to step forward. Funders, philanthropists, anybody else who wants to weigh in on this, join this initiative. Our election is 7 months away. With that, I want to thank everybody for coming. You will get a recording and stuff will be sent automatically to you, and we'll also invite you to the following event, which is going to dive deeper into the AI piece, which is also so exciting I can't actually talk about it. Thanks, everybody. Siyabata, and thank you for comparing everything.